Real men don't care if their woman parties with her boss. My wife said that before disappearing to a hotel with him. After 18 years of marriage, I found photos of their affair. She demanded half of everything and said the kids would never choose me. If marriage is a marathon, mine has been all uphill with no water stations in sight. I'm Alex Carter, 41 years old, a financial manager at Midwest Capital, and apparently married to a ghost who occasionally leaves lipstick stains on coffee mugs. Before we delve deeper into this story, I have a small request. Please subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Marta Carter, my wife of 18 years, had been working late 3 nights this week. Her boss, Brandon Fisk, seemed to require an excessive amount of after-hours consultations for someone who runs a mid-level advertising agency. Brandon drove a silver Porsche 911 and wore cologne that cost more than my monthly car payment. He also had that type of artificially white teeth that screamed midlife crisis louder than his sports car. I had met Brandon exactly once at Marta's company Christmas party. He had shaken my hand as if trying to crack walnuts and called me champ while talking about his latest CrossFit achievements. The man had the personality of a motivational poster and twice the arrogance. "Dad, you're mumbling again." My 17-year-old son, Ross, appeared in the doorway with his laptop under his arm. He inherited my dark hair and Marta's piercing green eyes. But fortunately, he got my sense of humor instead of her recent tendency towards self-centeredness. "Just reviewing some numbers," I said, closing the laptop. "Your mother is working late again." Ross rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I heard. Amelia thinks Mom is having an affair." My 15-year-old daughter had always been observant. Too observant. "Apparently. Your sister watches too much reality TV," I replied, though the words tasted like ash. "Maybe, but she's usually right about people." Ross shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, you know you can talk to us, right? We're not little kids anymore." The fact that my teenage children were offering me emotional support said it all about the current state of my marriage. I managed to smile. "I'm fine, champ. Go to bed." After Ross disappeared upstairs, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and settled into my leather armchair. The house felt huge and empty, despite being a modest 4-bedroom colonial-style house in suburban Naperville. We bought it when the kids were little, and Marta still pretended to enjoy my company. My phone vibrated. A message from my best friend and neighbor, Pip Sullivan. "I saw Marta's car at the downtown Hilton. I thought you should know." Pip lived 2 houses down and worked as a detective for the Chicago police. He had the kind of observational skills that made him excellent at his job and occasionally uncomfortable as a friend, but I preferred to know rather than live in blissful ignorance. I replied, "Thanks. Probably a midnight business dinner." "Come on, Alex." He was right. Of course, business dinners didn't last until midnight, and they certainly didn't require overnight stays in downtown hotels. But admitting that meant acknowledging what I had been desperately trying to ignore for months. The next morning, Marta walked into the kitchen with a nonchalant air, wearing yesterday's clothes and a guilty expression disguised as casual confidence. Her reddish-brown hair was slightly disheveled, and she had applied fresh lipstick in the car, a trick I had noticed before, but had never questioned. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing me on the cheek with the enthusiasm of someone completing a task. "Sorry about last night." The presentation ran long, and Brandon suggested we have dinner to discuss the revisions. "Until midnight?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "You know how these client dinners are, a lot of politicking, multiple courses." She busied herself with the coffee maker, avoiding eye contact. "How was your night?" "Quiet. Ross and Amelia asked about you. I'll make it up to them this weekend. Maybe we can all go to that new restaurant in downtown Naperville." It was a kind gesture, but we both knew she would find an excuse to cancel before Friday. Marta had become a master of making plans she had no intention of keeping. "Actually, I might not be available this weekend," I said casually. "I'm applying for a position in Seattle. Senior Financial Director at Pacific Northwest Holdings." Marta froze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Seattle? You never mentioned anything about Seattle." "It just came up. The headhunter called yesterday. Significant salary increase. Executive benefits package, corner office with a view." I watched her face carefully. "I'm flying out next week for the interview. But what about the kids and my career? You can't just make unilateral decisions about our family's future." The irony was overwhelming. The woman who had been making unilateral decisions about our marriage for months was suddenly concerned about the family's opinion. I haven't accepted anything yet, I said, but it's worth exploring. Unless you have a compelling reason for me to stay. She opened her mouth and then closed it. We both knew she couldn't voice her real objection, that my departure would complicate her affair with Brandon. This is so sudden, she said finally. Can't you find something local? Local opportunities are limited. Besides, a change of scenery might be good for all of us. The kids have friends here, Roots. You can't just uproot them because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. Midlife crisis. I laughed. That's rich coming from someone who has been staying out until midnight with her boss. Brandon is a client liaison opportunity. If you were more supportive of my career ambitions, you would understand the importance of networking. Sure, networking is that what we're calling it now. Marta's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I'm sure your networking sessions are purely professional. She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm late for work. We'll discuss this Seattle nonsense later. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of 18 years of marriage. Wedding photos on the fridge. The kids' drawings still taped to the pantry door. A calendar full of family obligations and school events. All the trappings of a happy life, empty as a movie set. My phone rang. The Seattle headhunter. Alex, good news. Pacific Northwest Holdings wants to fast-track your application. You can fly out tomorrow instead of next week. I looked around the empty kitchen, thought about Marta's guilty expression and the midnight business dinners, and made a decision that would change everything. Absolutely. Send me the details. The Seattle skyline stretched out before me like a promise of reinvention. My temporary corporate apartment occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower in Belltown, offering a view that made the Chicago suburbs seem like a distant memory. The space was sleek and modern, all clean lines and neutral colors, the kind of place where a man could think clearly without the weight of accumulated disappointments. I had been in Seattle for 3 days, and the job interview had gone better than expected. Pacific Northwest Holdings was expanding its operations in the Midwest and needed someone with my experience to manage their acquisitions in Chicago. The irony was not lost on me. They wanted me to eventually return to Chicago, but as a regional director, with enough authority to make Brandon Fisk look like the small-time player he really was. My phone vibrated. A message from Marta. The kids miss you. When are you coming home? I replied, depends on how the negotiations go. Seattle is growing on me. Don't be ridiculous. Your life is here. Is it? I'm starting to wonder what exactly I have there. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared. Finally, we should talk when you get back. We should. I agreed, though I suspected we had very different conversations in mind. My temporary assistant, Tisa Martinez, knocked on the office door. She was 26 years old, sharp as a tack, and possessed the kind of cheerful curiosity that made her invaluable for gathering information. Your wife called the main number, she announced, sitting in the chair across from my desk. She wanted to know when you'd be back in Chicago. I told her you were in meetings all day. Thanks. Any news from the executive team about the offer? They're drawing up the paperwork. Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You're about to become a very important man. Tisa smiled. Also, I may have done a little research on that Brandon Fisk character you mentioned. I raised an eyebrow. Research, public records, social media, professional networking sites. You know, standard background check. She pulled out a tablet. Interesting guy. 3 previous business partnerships that ended badly, 2 ex-wives, and some troubling financial patterns, like being leveraged up to his eyeballs. The Porsche is a lease. The downtown condo is mortgaged at 90%, and he has outstanding debts with 2 different lenders. Also, there are some interesting photos on his social media accounts. She turned the tablet towards me. Brandon's Instagram was a monument to manufactured success. Gym selfies, expensive dinners, and photos with various women who were not his ex-wives. Several recent photos showed him with Marta at what appeared to be business functions, but their body language suggested something far from professional. He's not very discreet, I observed. Arrogant men rarely are. They assume they're smarter than everyone else. Tisa paused. Is there anything else? I have a friend who works at the downtown Chicago Hilton. She mentioned seeing a man matching Brandon's description there regularly, always with the same woman. Reddish-brown hair, about 5 feet 6 inches, drives a blue Honda Accord. Marta drove a blue Honda Accord. Your friend is very observant. She works the night shift at the front desk. She pays attention to regulars, especially those who pay cash and don't use the hotel amenities. Tisa's expression was sympathetic, but professional. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. This can't be easy to hear. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't surprising either. Having my suspicions confirmed felt almost liberating, like finally diagnosing a persistent illness. I appreciate your thoroughness, I said. This information could prove useful. That night, I stood on my temporary balcony with a glass of wine watching the sun set over Elliott Bay. The view was spectacular. The city lights were beginning to twinkle. Ferries crossed the dark water, the Olympic Mountains silhouetted against the orange sky. It was the kind of view that made a man feel on top of the world instead of watching his marriage collapse from a distance. My phone rang. Pip Sullivan. How's Seattle? He asked without preamble. Beautiful. I'm considering making it permanent. Probably a good idea. Things are getting weird back here. Weird? How? Pip sighed. I saw Marta and Brandon at Francesca's last night. They weren't exactly hiding their relationship, holding hands, sharing dessert, the whole 9 yards. Half the restaurant was staring at them. Francesca's was an upscale Italian place in downtown Naperville. Exactly the kind of place where Marta's friends and neighbors might see her. The fact that she was being so public suggested either total recklessness or a deliberate strategy. Maybe she wants to get caught, I said. Maybe she wants you to file for divorce so she can play the victim. My husband abandoned me for a job in Seattle, so I found comfort with a friend. Pip had always been insightful about human nature. It came with the job. Let her play the victim, I said. I'm more interested in playing chess. What do you mean? I mean Brandon Fisk has made some assumptions about my character that might prove costly. He thinks I'm a passive suburban husband who will quietly accept whatever scraps of dignity my wife decides to leave me. And he's wrong. I looked at the Seattle skyline, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Very wrong. After hanging up with Pip, I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Marta. The subject line read, Seattle update. The job offer came through today. Significant salary increase, executive benefits, and a corner office with an incredible view. I've attached a picture so you can see what opportunities look like when you're not afraid to reach for them. The kids would love the view from up here. There's something liberating about seeing the world from this perspective. It makes all the small-minded people back home seem appropriately tiny. Give my regards to Brandon. I'm sure he'll understand the importance of seizing opportunities when they present themselves. Alex. I attached a photo of the Seattle skyline taken from my office window, and then hit send. Marta's reply came in 10 minutes. Stop being dramatic. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. I replied, adults don't sneak around like teenagers. Adults don't lie about working late when they're actually at hotels. And adults certainly don't parade their affairs around town like a victory lap. Enjoy dinner with Brandon tonight. I'm sure Francesca's has excellent desserts this time of year. This time her reply took an hour. We need to talk. We certainly do, I replied, but first I need to finish up some business here in Seattle. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not distracted by other people's drama. I closed the laptop and poured myself another glass of wine. Tomorrow I would accept the job offer and begin planning my return to Chicago. But I wouldn't be returning as the same man who had left. I would be returning as someone with resources, connections, and a very clear understanding of who my real enemies were. The view from the 32nd floor was spectacular, but the view from the moral high ground would be even better. The package arrived at my Seattle office on a Thursday morning, addressed to me personally, and with no return address. Inside, I found a manila envelope containing 8 high-resolution photographs that confirmed everything I had suspected about Marta and Brandon's professional relationship. The photos were taken at the downtown Chicago Hilton on several different dates. Brandon's silver Porsche in the parking garage, Marta entering the hotel lobby. The two of them in the elevator, Brandon's hand on the small of her back, a particularly damning shot of them kissing in the hallway outside room 847. Another of Marta leaving the next morning in the same clothes as the night before, Brandon's jacket over her shoulders. There was no note and no explanation, just the photos and a hotel receipt showing regular reservations in Brandon's name going back for months. Tisa, I called my assistant. Do you have a moment? She appeared at my door, took one look at my face, and closed the door behind her. Bad news. I handed her the envelope. She examined the photos with professional detachment and then set them aside. An anonymous tip? She asked. It seems so. Any idea who might have sent this? Someone who wants Brandon Fisk to suffer the consequences of his actions. An ex-wife, a business rival, maybe someone else he screwed over. Tisa paused. Or someone who likes you and wants you to have ammunition. Ammunition? For what? For whatever war you're planning to wage. She knew me better than I had realized. For the next week, I immersed myself in research with the kind of focused intensity one usually reserved for complex financial analyses. Tisa proved invaluable, using her network of friends and professional contacts to gather information that painted a complete picture of Brandon Fisk's vulnerabilities. The man was a house of cards waiting for the right wind. His advertising agency was hemorrhaging clients due to missed deadlines and cost overruns. 2 former business partners were considering legal action over disputed contracts. His ex-wives had filed complaints for late alimony payments. Most interestingly, he owed a significant amount of money to a private lender known for his aggressive collection methods. He's been using company funds to maintain his lifestyle, Tisa reported during one of our strategy sessions. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, Porsche lease payments. It's not technically embezzlement since he's the owner of the company, but it's left the business critically undercapitalized. And what's Marta's position in all this? She's the account manager for 3 of his largest clients. If those relationships soured, it would be devastating for the agency. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces of a plan starting to form. And what if those client relationships were based on false pretenses? What if the clients discovered their account manager is having an affair with her boss and using company resources for personal entertainment? That would be a serious breach of professional ethics. Most corporate clients have morality clauses in their service agreements. Indeed, they do. That night I called Ross and Amelia. We had been talking every few days since I arrived in Seattle, and their insights into the situation back home had been more valuable than they knew. Mom's been weird since you left, Amelia reported. She gets all dressed up for work, and she's been coming home really late, like after midnight. She's also on her phone constantly, Ross added, and she makes that guilty face whenever we ask about you. What kind of guilty face? Like when I got caught illegally downloading movies. You know, that I know I'm doing something wrong, but I'm going to pretend it's no big deal. Look. My kids were more perceptive than their mother gave them credit for. How would you guys feel about spending the summer in Seattle? I asked. I've got a great apartment with an amazing view, and there are some great universities around here for you to check out. Ross, are you and Mom getting a divorce? Amelia asked bluntly. There was no point in lying to them. They had already figured out more than most adults would have noticed. We're having some very serious problems, I admitted. Your mother has been making choices that have damaged our marriage, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Is she cheating on you? Ross asked quietly. Yes. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Amelia with that Brandon guy. The one with the stupid car and the fake teeth. How did you know about Brandon? Mom talks about him constantly. Brandon says this. Brandon thinks that. Brandon is so successful. It's gross. Plus she's been wearing perfume to work, and she only does that when she's trying to impress someone. We're sorry, Dad, Ross said. This sucks. Yes, it does. I agreed. But sometimes when things fall apart, it creates opportunities to build something better. After hanging up with the kids, I opened my laptop and began composing a series of emails. The first was to the 3 clients Tisa had identified as the most important accounts for Brandon's agency. I had done some research and discovered that all 3 companies had strict ethical guidelines for their service providers. The emails were carefully worded, professional, and devastating. Dear Mr. Harrison, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to bring to your attention a matter of professional concern regarding your current advertising agency, Fisk Creative Solutions. It has come to my attention that the agency's owner, Brandon Fisk, and your account manager, Marta Carter, have been engaged in a personal relationship that may compromise their professional judgment and the interests of your company. I have attached documentation suggesting that company resources have been used to facilitate this relationship, including the redirection of client entertainment funds for personal use. As a fellow business professional, I felt obligated to share this information so that you can make informed decisions about your service provider relationships. Sincerely, Alex Carter, Senior Financial Director, Pacific Northwest Holdings. I sent similar emails to all 3 clients and then sat back to wait for the inevitable fallout. The next morning, Tisa knocked on my office door with a satisfied expression. Brandon Fisk's phone has been ringing off the hook all morning, She reported my friend at the hotel. Says he checked out of his regular room in a hurry yesterday afternoon. Also, there's quite a bit of buzz on social media. She showed me her tablet. Brandon's LinkedIn profile had been flooded with comments and connection requests from people asking about his professional practices. Someone had shared the hotel photos in a local business networking group along with speculation about ethical violations and misuse of client funds. It's going viral in Chicago business circles, Tisa said, and not in a good way. My phone vibrated. A message from Marta. What have you done? I replied, I'm not sure what you mean. I've been in Seattle, focused on my new career opportunities. Brandon's clients are asking questions. People are talking. People talk when they have something interesting to discuss. Maybe you and Brandon should have been more discreet. This is vengeful and petty. This is consequences. There's a difference. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, I'm driving to Seattle. We need to talk face to face. I'm afraid I'm not available for visitors. I'm in the middle of some important business negotiations. Maybe you should focus on your own business relationships. I hear they need some attention. I turned off my phone and looked out at the Seattle skyline. The view from the 32nd floor was still spectacular, but it was about to get even better. Brandon Fisk had made the mistake of thinking I was a passive victim who would quietly accept whatever humiliation he and my wife decided to inflict on me. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I returned to Chicago on a Friday night in late May, driving a rented BMW with Washington state license plates and staying at the downtown Marriott instead of going home. The kids knew I was coming and had agreed to have dinner with me on Saturday night. Marta knew nothing of my return. The 2 weeks since I sent those emails to Brandon's clients had been eventful. All 3 companies had terminated their contracts with Fisk Creative Solutions, citing ethical concerns and professional incompatibilities. Brandon's agency had laid off half its staff, including Marta, who was now unemployed and struggling to find another position in an industry where gossip traveled faster than wildfire. Pip Sullivan met me at the hotel bar on Friday night, bringing updates on the local situation. It's been brutal, he reported, sipping his beer. Brandon's basically been blacklisted from every decent business networking group in the area. Marta's been calling around trying to find work, but word has gotten out about the affair and the loss of clients. Nobody wants to touch her. How are they handling the stress? Not well. Brandon's been drinking heavily and his Porsche was repossessed last week. Marta's been staying at her mother's house since she can't afford the mortgage without your income. And the kids are with Marta's mother too. Ross called me yesterday asking if I thought you'd be taking them to Seattle permanently. I think they're ready for a change of scenery. That was exactly what I was hoping to hear. On Saturday morning, I drove through my old neighborhood in the BMW, observing the changes that had occurred during my absence. The house seemed smaller than I remembered. The lawn was overgrown, newspapers piled up on the front porch. Marta's Honda was not in the driveway. I parked across the street and called my neighbor, Mrs. Ferris, an elderly widow who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. Alex, I heard you were in Seattle. How wonderful that you're doing so well out there. Her voice conveyed the kind of satisfaction that comes from watching dramatic events unfold. Things have been quite eventful around here since you left. So I've heard. How are Marta and the kids adjusting? Oh, the kids are lovely as always, very mature about the whole situation. But Marta, Mrs. Ferris paused dramatically. Well, let's just say the neighborhood has been buzzing about her relationship with that Brandon fellow. Of course, they were quite brazen about it before everything fell apart. Now he doesn't come around anymore, and she's been having some very loud phone conversations in the backyard. Something about lawyers and divorce proceedings. Divorce proceedings. She's been telling people that you abandoned the family for a job in Seattle, and she's consulting with lawyers about her options, though I suspect her options are quite limited given the circumstances. After hanging up with Mrs. Ferris, I drove to the gym where Brandon was known to work out. It was an upscale fitness center in downtown Naperville, the kind of place where middle-aged men paid premium prices to pretend they were still in their 20s. I found him in the weight room struggling with a bench press routine that was clearly beyond his current capabilities. He looked terrible, unshaven, bloodshot eyes, the kind of desperate exhaustion that comes from watching your life implode in real time. I walked over to his bench just as he struggled to rack the bar. Need a spot? I asked casually. He looked up startled, then his face flushed with recognition and anger. What the hell are you doing here? Working out. It's a public gym. I helped him guide the bar into the rack and then stepped back. You look like you could use a little help. I don't need anything from you. He sat up, wiping the sweat from his face with a towel. Especially not fake concern. There's nothing fake about it. I heard about your recent business troubles. Losing 3 major clients in 1 week must have been devastating. His jaw tightened. You think you're so clever, don't you? I think I'm a man who doesn't appreciate other people messing with his family, but I also think you've learned that actions have consequences. Brandon stood up, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. You destroyed my business. You cost me everything. I didn't destroy anything. I simply shared information with interested parties. What they did with that information was their choice. I smiled pleasantly. Though I have to say, the Porsche repossession was a nice touch. It really drives home the point about living beyond your means. You think this is over? You think you've won? I think I'm just getting started. You see, Brandon, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed I was a passive suburban husband who would quietly accept whatever humiliation you and my wife decided to inflict on me. You assumed wrong. He took another step closer, his hands clenched into fists. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. There's a difference. I leaned in a little, lowering my voice. I know about the private lender you owe money to. I know about your ex-wife's complaints. I know about the wrongful termination lawsuits your former employees are considering. And most importantly, I know you're exactly the kind of man who crumbles under pressure. You don't know anything. I know that the Seattle weather is terrible for luxury cars. All that rain and salt air really eats away at the paint and chrome. I straightened up, smiling. Enjoy the rest of your workout, Brandon. Try not to lift more than you can handle. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth open and his hands trembling with rage. That night, I met Ross and Amelia for dinner at their favorite restaurant in downtown Naperville. They both seemed older than when I left, more serious, as if they had been forced to grow up quickly in the wake of their mother's decisions. What's Seattle really like? Amelia asked over dessert. Honestly, it's been good for me. Clean air, new challenges, interesting people. I think you'd both love it. What about Mom? Ross asked quietly. What's going to happen with her? Are you going to try to fix things? I considered my words carefully. Your mother made choices that damaged our marriage beyond repair. I can't fix something when the other person isn't interested in fixing it. She keeps saying you abandoned us, Amelia said. But we know that's not true. She was the one who checked out first. I'm not going to speak ill of your mother, but I want you both to know that whatever happens between us, it doesn't change how much I love you or how committed I am to being your father. Can we spend the summer with you in Seattle? Ross asked. Mom's been tough to be around lately. I was hoping you'd ask. I've already looked into schools out there, and there are some great options. If you decide you want to stay permanently, we can make that work. Relief flooded their faces. They had been carrying the weight of their mother's drama for months, and the prospect of an escape clearly appealed to them. After dinner, I drove them back to their grandmother's house and watched them disappear inside. The house was dark, except for a single light in what I knew was Marta's old bedroom. She was probably inside planning her next move, consulting with lawyers, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of her decisions. I would give her that chance tomorrow, but first I had one more visit to make. I drove to Brandon's downtown condo, a glass tower that probably looked impressive when he could afford the rent. The building's parking garage was nearly empty, and I found his assigned spot easily. It was vacant, of course, since his Porsche had been repossessed. I parked the BMW in a visitor spot and walked to the elevator. Brandon's apartment was on the 15th floor, and I could see lights on through the windows. I knocked on the door and waited. He opened it wearing a bathrobe and holding a glass of whiskey, looking like a man who had given up on keeping up appearances. What do you want now? He asked wearily. To make you an offer. I'm not interested in anything you're selling. You should be, because what I'm selling is a way out of this mess that doesn't involve bankruptcy, lawsuits, or criminal charges. He stared at me for a long moment, and then stepped aside to let me in. The condo was a disaster. Empty takeout containers, unpaid bills scattered across the coffee table, clothes thrown over the furniture. The smell of desperation hung in the air like stale cologne. Nice place, I said, sitting in a chair uninvited. Very lived in. Get to the point. The point is simple. You're going to disappear from my family's life permanently. You're going to find a new job in a different city, preferably on a different coast. You're going to delete Marta's contact information and never speak to her again. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed him a video file. It was hotel security footage showing him and Marta entering and exiting room 847 on multiple occasions. Then this goes to your ex-wife's divorce lawyers along with the documentation of your recent financial irregularities. I'm sure they'd be very interested in your creative accounting methods. His face went pale. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to create enough doubt and scandal to make your life completely unlivable, which, frankly, I've already done quite effectively. He drained his glass of whiskey and set it down with trembling hands. What makes you think I won't tell Marta about this conversation? Because Marta can't help you anymore. She's unemployed, unemployable, and about to be divorced. Associating with her will only make your situation worse. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. You have 48 hours to make arrangements to leave Chicago. After that, things will get much more unpleasant for you. You're destroying people's lives over a marriage that was already over. I'm teaching people that actions have consequences. It's a lesson you should have learned a long time ago. I left him sitting in his disastrous condo, staring at the empty whiskey glass and contemplating his very limited options. The next morning, I drove to Marta's mother's house for the conversation that would end our marriage once and for all. Marta's mother lived in a modest ranch-style house in Wheaton, the kind of place where middle-class dreams went to die quietly. I pulled the BMW into the driveway on Sunday morning and knocked on the front door, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than Marta's monthly unemployment check. Mrs. Patricia Kowalski opened the door with a look of disapproval that had been her default setting since I married her daughter 18 years ago. She had never thought I was good enough for Marta, which made the current situation particularly ironic. Alex, I suppose you're here to gloat. I'm here to discuss custody arrangements and the division of assets with my wife. Is she available? She's in the kitchen crying over her coffee and wondering how her life fell apart so quickly. I'm sure she is. Mrs. Kowalski led me through the cluttered living room to the kitchen, where Marta was sitting at a small table surrounded by legal documents and tissues. She looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how much she had aged in the last month. The stress of unemployment and social ostracism had carved lines around her eyes and mouth that makeup couldn't hide. Hello, Marta. Alex gestured to the chair across from her. I suppose you're satisfied now. Satisfied with what? With destroying my career, my reputation, my future, with turning my own children against me. I sat down and studied her face. There was no remorse there, no acknowledgement of her role in the current situation. Even now, facing the consequences of her decisions, she saw herself as the victim. I didn't destroy anything, I said calmly. I simply stopped enabling your destructive behavior. You sent those photos to my clients. You ruined my relationship with Brandon. You poisoned the children against me. I shared information with interested parties. Brandon ruined himself by being careless and arrogant, and the children figured out what was going on long before I said anything. Mrs. Kowalski hovered in the doorway, clearly wanting to intervene, but smart enough to stay out of it. What do you want? Marta asked wearily. I want a divorce. Clean, simple, uncontested. I'll get primary custody of the kids. You can have visitation rights. I'll get the house and my retirement accounts. You can keep your car and any personal belongings you want. That's not fair. I deserve half of everything. You deserve exactly what your decisions have earned you, which is frankly less than nothing. So you should consider yourself lucky. She leaned forward, trying to summon some of her old fire. I'll fight you in court. I'll claim abandonment, emotional cruelty, whatever it takes. With what money? What lawyer is going to represent you without a retainer? And what judge is going to be sympathetic when they see the evidence of your affair? I pulled out a tablet and showed her a compilation of photos, hotel receipts, and social media posts documenting her relationship with Brandon. Her face went white as she scrolled through the images. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The point is I have them, and they tell a very clear story about who is responsible for the breakdown of our marriage. You can't use this in court. It's private. It's evidence of adultery, which is still grounds for divorce in Illinois. It's also evidence of poor judgment, which is relevant in custody decisions. Marta's mother finally couldn't hold back. Alex, this is vengeful and cruel. Marta made mistakes, but she doesn't deserve to lose everything. Mrs. Kowalski, with all due respect, your daughter didn't just make mistakes. She made calculated choices to betray her family and destroy her marriage. She chose to have an affair. She chose to be careless about it. She chose to prioritize her relationship with Brandon over her responsibilities to her children. These aren't mistakes. They're choices, and choices have consequences. She was unhappy in the marriage. Then she should have asked for a divorce instead of sneaking around like a teenager. Instead, she chose to have it all, and now she's surprised that there are consequences for her actions. I turned back to Marta. You have two options. Sign the divorce papers I'm having drawn up. Agree to the custody and property arrangements I've outlined. And we can end this quietly. Or fight me in court and lose everything, including your relationship with the kids. The kids won't choose you over me. I'm their mother. The kids have already chosen. They're spending the summer with me in Seattle, and they're looking forward to starting over somewhere where people don't know about their mother's affair. The words hit her like a physical blow. She slumped in her chair, finally beginning to understand the extent of her losses. This is all Brandon's fault, she said quietly. He pursued me. He made promises about our future together. And where is Brandon now? Silence. He's gone, isn't he? Moved to another city, deleted your contact information, pretended you never existed. Because Brandon Fisk is exactly the kind of man who runs when things get tough. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I loved him. You didn't love him. You loved the idea of him. You loved the excitement, the secrecy, the feeling of being desired by someone successful, but you never really knew him, because if you had, you would have realized he was exactly the kind of man who would abandon you the moment things got complicated. I stood up, adjusting my suit jacket. I'm flying back to Seattle tomorrow morning. The kids are coming with me. You have 1 week to decide whether you want to handle this divorce amicably or turn it into a public spectacle that will only make your situation worse. Alex, wait. She looked at me with desperate eyes. Can't we try therapy? Can't we work through this? Work through what? Your affair, your lies, your complete lack of remorse for what you've done to our family. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences, but you're not sorry you did it. Because even now you're trying to blame everyone but yourself. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part is, Marta? I would have given you the divorce if you had asked for it. I would have split everything 50-50ths, and we would have agreed to joint custody. We could have ended this marriage with dignity and respect. Instead, you chose to sneak around, lie, and humiliate me publicly. So now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. Mrs. Kowalski followed me to the front door. Alex, please. She's my daughter. Can't you have some compassion? I have plenty of compassion, Mrs. Kowalski, but I also have self-respect, which is something your daughter apparently never learned to value. I walked out to the BMW, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear Marta crying and her mother trying to comfort her, but their drama was no longer my responsibility. My phone vibrated as I pulled away. A message from Ross. Mom called us crying. She says you're taking us away from her forever. I pulled over and called him. Dad, what's going on? I offered your mother a fair divorce settlement and a reasonable custody arrangement. She's upset because she wanted to fight for more than she deserves. Are we really moving to Seattle permanently? If that's what you want, you can always visit your mother. But I think a fresh start would be good for all of us. Amelia and I talked it over. We want to go with you. Are you sure? It's a big decision. We're sure. Mom's been difficult lately, and honestly, we're embarrassed by what she did. All our friends know about the affair. It's humiliating. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's not your fault, Dad. You didn't do anything wrong. That night, I had dinner alone at the hotel restaurant, watching the sun set over the Chicago skyline and thinking about the future. Tomorrow I would fly back to Seattle with my kids and begin building a new life. Marta would sign the divorce papers eventually. She had no other choice. Brandon was already gone, disappeared into whatever hole men like him crawl into when their carefully constructed facades crumble. I had won completely and decisively, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like justice. My phone vibrated one last time, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for exposing Brandon Fisk for what he really is. He destroyed my marriage too, but now he's paying for it a friend. I smiled and deleted the message. Apparently, I wasn't the only person Brandon had underestimated. The anonymous photos that had started this whole chain of events suddenly made perfect sense. I raised my wine glass in a silent toast to whoever had sent those pictures. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected sources, and sometimes the best revenge is simply to give people enough rope to hang themselves. Brandon Fisk and my wife had provided plenty of rope. All I had done was make sure everyone could see them use it. The next morning, I picked up Ross and Amelia from their grandmother's house. They had their bags packed and were ready for their new adventure. Marta wasn't there. Mrs. Kowalski said she had gone for a drive to clear her head. She'll come around, the older woman said as we loaded the kids' belongings into the BMW. This is all just too much change, too fast. Change is hard. I agreed. But sometimes it's necessary. As we drove towards O'Hare Airport, I looked in the rearview mirror at my children, both absorbed in their phones and excited about their new life in Seattle. They had been through a lot in the last few months, but they were resilient. They would be fine. In the distance, I could see the Chicago skyline shrinking behind us, taking with it 18 years of marriage, countless memories, and a life that no longer fit the man I had become. Ahead lay Seattle with its clean air, spectacular views, and endless possibilities. I had started this journey as a passive suburban husband who had been taken for granted and humiliated by his wife and her lover. I was ending it as a man who had learned that sometimes the best way to deal with bullies is to let them destroy themselves, and then make sure everyone has a front row seat to watch it happen. Brandon Fisk had assumed I was weak. Marta had assumed I was expendable. They had both learned just how wrong they were, but by then it was too late for it to matter. The view from the moral high ground was spectacular, and I intended to enjoy it for a long, long time.